Our enemies rejoiced until humanity answered the call. The year was 2387. And humanity had finally found its place among the stars, or so they believed for nearly a century. Humans had been members of the Galactic Concord, a coalition of 42 spacefaring species that governed the known galaxy through trade, diplomacy, and mutual defense. But humanity remained a minor voice in that great assembly, often dismissed as too young, too reckless, and too unremarkable to matter. The older species looked at humans the way adults look at noisy children, with tolerance. Perhaps, but never with respect. Admiral Yuki Tanaka stood on the bridge of the carrier Eternal Vigilance, watching Earth turn slowly beneath her. She had served in the fleet for 30 years, and she had always believed that humanity would one day earn its place at the table of great civilizations. She believed they just needed time, however, was about to run out. The first warning came at 0347 hours, when deep space sensors detected an impossible number of ships emerging from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the solar system. The sensor officer's voice trembled as he announced the count: 3,000 vessels, then 5,000, then 10,000. The numbers kept climbing until the instruments could no longer keep track. Identify them, Tanaka ordered, though something cold had already settled in her stomach. Vethrak signatures, Admiral. It's the Dominion, their entire war fleet. The Vethrak. Dominion had been the nightmare lurking at the edges of known space for centuries. They were insectoid conquerors who moved through the galaxy like a plague of locusts, consuming everything in their path. Their hive mind coordination made them brutally efficient in battle, and their complete lack of mercy made them terrifying. The Galactic Concord had maintained an uneasy peace with them for decades. But everyone knew that peace was built on sand. Now the sand had shifted within minutes. The Vethrak fleet split into dozens of attack groups. They moved with perfect synchronization, each ship knowing exactly where to go and what to destroy. Earth's orbital defense grid, the pride of human engineering, lasted exactly 47 minutes before it was reduced to burning debris. The planetary shields held longer, but not long enough. Admiral Tanaka watched her homeworld burn on a dozen different screens. Cities that had stood for thousands of years vanished in pillars of fire. Billions of voices cried out and then fell silent. And still the Vethrak kept coming. Admiral, we're receiving reports from the colonies, a communications officer said, his face pale as death. Simultaneous attacks on all 12 human worlds. They hit everywhere at once. Tanaka closed her eyes for just a moment. She had trained her whole life for war, but nothing had prepared her for this, for the systematic extinction of her species. Then her eyes snapped open again, and the grief in them had turned to iron. All ships, begin emergency evacuation protocols. Get every civilian transport off the surface. Fighter squadrons will provide cover for the retreat. We're falling back to Rally Point Omega. Admiral, if we retreat, Earth is already lost, Lieutenant. Our job now is to save whoever we can. Move. The evacuation was chaos wrapped in fire. Human ships of every size fled toward the outer planets, chased by Vethrak hunters that picked them off one by one. For every transport that escaped, 3 more were destroyed. The death toll climbed into the billions, and it showed no signs of stopping. Then the Vethrak delivered their final message: a planet cracker weapon, a device so terrible that even the Vethrak used it sparingly, powered up and fired at Earth's moon. Luna, humanity's first step into space, the symbol of their dreams among the stars, shattered like glass. The explosion sent asteroid-sized chunks of rock crashing into Earth's surface, turning the burning planet into a tomb. Admiral Tanaka watched the moon die, and she felt something break inside her chest. But she did not cry, and she did not scream. She simply turned to her crew and gave orders to continue the retreat. The surviving human fleet Barely 200 ships out of an original 3,000 limped toward the borders of Concord space. Tanaka expected help. She expected the allied species, who had promised mutual defense, to come rushing to humanity's aid. Instead, she received a diplomatic transmission. The Galactic Concord, in an emergency session, had voted to expel humanity from the coalition. The decision was nearly unanimous. The official reason was strategic necessity, but Tanaka knew the truth. They were afraid. They had seen what the Vethrak could do, and they wanted nothing to do with a species that had earned the Dominion's wrath. "We express our deepest condolences," the Salian ambassador said, his multiple eyes blinking with false sympathy. "But the Concord cannot risk war with the Dominion over a minor species. You must understand, Admiral, this is simply the way of things. The strong survive, and the weak." Tanaka cut the transmission before he could finish. For 3 days, the refugee fleet drifted through neutral space, looking for a place to hide. They found an abandoned mining station and an asteroid field, far from any major shipping lanes. And there they stopped to count their losses and tend their wounded. The numbers were devastating. Out of 14 billion humans spread across 13 worlds, fewer than 50 million had escaped. Everything else, their cities, their history, their culture, their home, was gone on the 4th day. The Vethrak High Praetor Vexal broadcast a message across every communication channel in the galaxy. His insectoid face filled screens on 1,000 worlds as he declared humanity functionally extinct. "Let this serve as a lesson," Vexal clicked in his harsh mechanical voice. "Those who stand against the Dominion will be erased. Humanity is no more. Their worlds belong to us now. Their memory will fade. In 100 years, no one will even remember they existed." Across Dominion space, celebrations erupted. The Vethrak had destroyed another species, and the galaxy had done nothing to stop them. On Concord worlds, the reaction was more muted relief mixed with shame, though few would admit the shame outlawed in the abandoned mining station. A young girl named May sat beside her grandfather in a crowded refugee bay. She had watched her parents die when their transport was hit during the evacuation, and now she had only one family member left. "Grandfather," she whispered, "are we going to die too? Are humans really finished?" The old man looked at his granddaughter, then looked out the viewport at the cold and distant stars. His eyes were tired and full of grief, but somewhere beneath the sorrow, something else flickered, something that refused to die. "We have been through hard times before, little one," he said softly. "We have faced ice ages and plagues and wars that nearly destroyed us. Every time, our enemies thought we were finished. Every time, we came back." He put his arm around her and held her close. "We always have." Outside the viewport, the stars burned on, cold and indifferent. But somewhere in that vast darkness, the scattered remnants of humanity were already beginning to plan. Our enemies rejoiced until humanity answered the call. 3 years had passed since the fall of Earth, and the galaxy had already begun to forget the Vethrak Dominion continued its expansion, swallowing world after world while the Galactic Concord watched in nervous silence. Trade routes shifted to avoid Dominion space. Diplomats spoke in careful whispers, and the name humanity faded from conversation, becoming nothing more than a cautionary tale told to frighten young species who thought they could challenge the natural order. But the galaxy did not know everything scattered across the dark spaces between stars, in hidden asteroid bases and abandoned stations. In ships that ran silent through the void, humanity survived. They had learned to live in shadows, to move without being seen, to exist in the cracks of a galaxy that had written them off as dead and in no shadows. They had been busy. Admiral Yuki Tanaka sat at the center of a holographic display that showed the positions of 47 secret human outposts spread across 3 sectors. Her hair had gone completely gray in 3 years, and new lines had carved themselves into her face. But her eyes burned with the same fierce determination that had kept the refugee fleet alive in those first desperate days. "Report from Station 14, her aide said. "The new reactor designs are ready for production. We can triple our power output within 6 months. And Station 7? The captured Vethrak weapons have been fully analyzed. Our engineers believe they can improve on the original designs." Tanaka allowed herself a small smile. When the evacuation happened, humanity had fled with almost nothing, a handful of ships, some basic supplies, and millions of terrified refugees. Now, 3 years later, they had transformed that nothing into something the galaxy would never expect. They called themselves the Ember Compact, a secret council that united every surviving human community under a single purpose. The name came from an old saying, "Even when a fire seems dead, a single ember can spark a new blaze." That blaze was coming far from Tanaka's command center. In a completely different sector of space, a battered cargo ship called the Defiant Wake drifted toward a Vethrak supply convoy. The ship looked like junk. Its hull was patched with mismatched metal plates, its engines wheezed and sputtered, and its weapons were hidden behind false panels that made it appear unarmed. Captain Marcus Cole liked it that way. "How many escorts?" he asked, studying the tactical display. "3 light cruisers," his first officer replied. "Standard formation. They're not expecting trouble. They never do." Cole had been a cargo pilot before the war, a nobody hauling freight between colony worlds. He had lost his wife and 2 children when the Vethrak struck, and something inside him had died with them. But something else had been born in its place, a cold, patient rage that demanded payment in blood for 2 years. Cole and his crew had raided Vethrak supply lines, stealing weapons, freeing prisoners, and spreading fear among an enemy that was not supposed to feel fear. The Dominion had put a bounty on his head so large that half the pirates in the galaxy were hunting him. He considered it a compliment. "Take us in," Cole ordered. "Standard approach. We're just a harmless merchant ship that wandered off course." The ambush was quick and brutal. The Defiant Wake dropped its disguise at point-blank range, and hidden railguns tore through the first cruiser before it could raise shields. The second cruiser managed to return fire, but Cole's pilot, a former racing champion named Jin, flew circles around the larger ship while the rest of the crew pounded it into scrap. The third cruiser tried to run. Cole let it go. "They'll report back to their commanders," his first officer warned. "Good. Let them tell everyone what happened here. Let them know that humans are still fighting. Let them be afraid to sleep." While Cole waged his private war, a different kind of battle was being fought in a hidden laboratory deep inside an asteroid that had no name on any chart. Dr. Lena Okonkwo had been one of the galaxy's leading xenobiologists before the fall. She had spent her career studying alien species, trying to understand how different forms of life thought and functioned. Now she used that knowledge for a darker purpose: run the simulation again. She told her assistant. The holographic display showed a Vethrak warrior, a nightmarish creature with 6 limbs, armored skin, and mandibles that could crush steel. But Okonkwo was not interested in its physical form. She was interested in the glowing node at the base of its skull, where its brain connected to the bioelectric network that linked all Vethrak together. "The relay nodes are the key," she explained to the junior scientists who had gathered to watch. "Each Vethrak is connected to a local node, and each local node connects to a regional hub. Destroy the hub, and every Vethrak linked to it loses coordination. They become confused, disoriented, unable to work together. How do we destroy the hubs?" Okonkwo smiled, a thin, tired expression that held no warmth. "Their network operates on a very specific frequency. I have developed an electromagnetic pulse calibrated to that exact frequency. One burst from a single ship could disable an entire regional hub. She pulled up another display showing the theoretical range of the weapon. The numbers were impressive. If we can get this device close enough to a major hub, we could throw an entire Vethrak fleet into chaos. Their greatest strength would become their greatest weakness. The news of Okonkwo's breakthrough spread quickly through the Ember Compact. For the first time in 3 years, people began to speak of something beyond mere survival. They began to speak of victory, but the work was far from finished. Ships needed to be built, weapons needed to be manufactured, and most importantly, humanity needed allies. The Galactic Concord had abandoned them, but not every species agreed with that decision. The Tyranny Republic, a proud race of warrior philosophers who valued honor above all else, had argued against humanity's expulsion. The Keth Collective, ancient beings of living crystal who measured time in millennia, had remained silent during the vote. Their true feelings unknown in secret meetings conducted through encrypted channels and neutral intermediaries. Human diplomats began reaching out to these potential friends. The conversations were delicate and slow, but progress was being made meanwhile. The Vethrak continued to underestimate their supposedly extinct enemy. High Praetor Vexal dismissed reports of human activity as the twitching of a corpse and focused his attention on expanding Dominion territory. He had destroyed humanity once. How hard could it be to destroy them again if necessary? He would learn the answer to that question soon enough in her command center. Admiral Tanaka composed a coded message and sent it to every hidden human outpost across the galaxy. The words were simple, but their meaning was clear. 3 years we have bled. 3 years we have learned. Now we prepare. Phase 1 begins across the darkness of space. In stations and ships and hidden colonies, humanity read those words and understood. The ember was growing soon. It would become a fire. Our enemies rejoiced until humanity answered the call to Urt. Reach was a vast field of ice and rock at the very edge of a dead star system, far from any trade routes and completely worthless to anyone who did not know what to look for. The Vethrak had scanned it once, found nothing of interest, and never returned. That had been a mistake hidden inside hollowed-out asteroids and beneath kilometers of frozen debris. Humanity had built the largest secret shipyard in galactic history. Automated factories worked around the clock, forging hulls from salvaged metal and stolen alloys. Engineers who had once designed pleasure yachts now created weapons of war. And deep in the heart of the complex, thousands of ships waited in the darkness like sleeping predators. Admiral Tanaka walked through the main hangar bay, inspecting the fleet that would carry humanity's hopes into battle. The ships were not like anything the galaxy had seen before, small, fast, and bristling with weapons. Designed to swarm and overwhelm rather than stand and fight. We call it the swarm doctrine, explained the chief engineer, a man named Kowalski, who had lost his entire family in the fall. The Vethrak used their numbers and coordination to crush enemies. We're going to use those same tactics against them, but faster and meaner. Tanaka studied the nearest ship, a sleek attack craft barely larger than a shuttle, but armed with enough firepower to threaten a vessel 10 times its size. How many do we have? 4,000 ready to fly. Another 2,000 in final assembly. By the time we launch, we'll have close to 8,000 strike ships, plus the carriers and support vessels. It was not enough to match the Vethrak fleet in open battle. Nothing could match that, but it was enough to hurt them badly. It was enough to make them bleed, while Tanaka prepared for war on a grand scale. Captain Cole continued his private campaign of terror. His raids had grown bolder and more frequent, hitting targets that should have been impossible to reach. But his latest mission was different from anything he had attempted before. The world was called Service for a mining planet deep in Dominion space where the Vethrak kept over 200,000 slaves from a dozen conquered species. The defenses were formidable, the garrison was large, and any sane person would have called the rescue mission suicide. Cole was not feeling particularly sane these days. "We goin' fast, and we goin' hard," he told his crew as the defiant wake approached the planet. Drop teams hit the slave compounds while the ships draw the garrison's attention. "We have exactly 40 minutes to get everyone loaded before Vethrak reinforcements arrive. And if we can't get everyone out in 40 minutes? Cole's jaw tightened. "Then we stay until we do." The battle for Service 4 was the bloodiest of Cole's career. His small fleet fought against overwhelming odds, losing ship after ship while the ground teams struggled to evacuate the slaves. Cole himself took a plasma burn that nearly cost him his arm, but he refused to leave until the last transport was away when it was over. 212,000 beings of various species had been freed from Vethrak bondage. Many of them had never seen a human before, and they stared at their rescuers with a mixture of awe and disbelief. "Why?" asked a Tarani prisoner, a young warrior who had been captured in a border skirmish years ago. "Why would you risk so much for us?" Cole looked at the freed slaves crowding the cargo bays of his surviving ships, and for a moment his hard expression softened, because someone should. News of the Service 4 raid spread through the galaxy like wildfire. For the first time, species beyond humanity began to see the survivors in a new light, not as refugees or victims, but as warriors who refused to surrender. On Tarani worlds, poets composed songs about the human raiders who fought against impossible odds. Among the Keth collective, the ancient crystals hummed with discussions about a species that valued freedom more than survival. The secret talks between the Ember Compact and potential allies suddenly became much easier. "The Tarani Republic will stand with humanity," announced Ambassador Karath, a scarred warrior who had lost 3 siblings to the Vethrak. "Your people have shown more courage than any species in living memory. We will not let that courage stand alone." The Keth collective took longer to decide. They always took longer, but eventually their response came as well. "We have watched the Vethrak consume the galaxy for 10,000 years," their representative intoned in a voice like grinding stone. "We have waited for someone to stand against them. Perhaps humanity is that someone. We will contribute our dreadnoughts to your cause." Admiral Tanaka received these pledges with gratitude, but no celebration. She knew that allies alone would not win this war. They needed a plan that could break the Vethrak's coordination and shatter their confidence. That plan came from Dr. Okonkwo. "I have completed the weapon," Okonkwo reported during a secure transmission to command. "Full-scale tests have exceeded all expectations. One ship carrying our device can disable a regional relay hub affecting up to 500 Vethrak vessels simultaneously." "How close does the ship need to get?" "Within 10,000 kilometers. The pulse needs to penetrate the hub shielding." That was close, dangerously close. The ship carrying the device would almost certainly be destroyed in the attempt, but they had pilots willing to take that risk. They had an entire species willing to take that risk. High Praetor Vexal, meanwhile, remained blind to the storm gathering against him. His intelligence officers brought him reports of an increased human activity, of the Service 4 disaster, of rumors about a secret fleet, and he dismissed them all. "Humans are vermin," he declared to his war council. "They hide in holes and nibble at our edges, but they lack the strength for real war. Let them raid supply convoys and free slaves. It changes nothing. The Dominion is eternal." His admirals agreed, because disagreeing with the High Praetor was a quick way to die. And so the Vethrak continued their expansion, spreading their forces across vast territories, leaving their core systems increasingly vulnerable in the Oort reach. Admiral Tanaka stood before a massive holographic map showing every known Vethrak position across 3 sectors. She studied the display for a long time, her eyes tracing the paths of enemy fleets and calculating the distances between key targets. Then she reached out and circled one system in glowing red Nexus Prime, the military headquarters of the Dominion, home to their largest shipyards and most important commanders. "This is where we hit them," she announced to her assembled officers. "This is where we show the galaxy that the Vethrak can be beaten. This is where we take back everything they stole from us." The officers stared at the display in silence. Nexus Prime was the most heavily defended system in Dominion space, protected by thousands of ships and orbital fortresses that could withstand almost anything. "They think we're dead," Tanaka continued, her voice rising. "They think we're beaten. They think we're nothing but ghosts fighting shadows. Let's show them what ghosts can do." The silence broke into a roar of approval that echoed through the chamber and out into the dark reaches of space. Where 8,000 human ships waited for the order to fly, the storm had gathered. Now it was time to strike. Our enemies rejoiced until humanity answered the call of the Vethrak patrol cruiser. Endless hunger was making its standard sweep through the outer reaches of the Nexus Prime system when the universe seemed to tear itself apart. One moment, the space ahead was empty. The next, it was filled with ships, hundreds of them, then thousands, pouring out of faster-than-light jump points like water through a broken dam. The sensor officer barely had time to scream a warning before the first human missiles struck the cruiser's hull across the Nexus Prime system. Similar scenes played out simultaneously. From 37 different entry points, the human fleet emerged in perfect coordination, catching the defenders completely off guard. Admiral Tanaka had planned the attack for months, studying patrol routes and sensor gaps, waiting for the exact moment when Vethrak defenses would be at their weakest. That moment was now. All wings. "Execute attack pattern Alpha," Tanaka commanded from the bridge of her flagship Humanity's Vengeance. "Strike teams target the orbital shipyards. Carrier groups draw the heavy cruisers away from the planet. And someone get me Captain Cole. His mission is the most important of all." Cole was already moving. The Defiant Wake led a squadron of 12 ships through the chaos of battle, weaving between explosions and debris with the reckless skill that had made Cole legendary. In the cargo hold of his ship sat Dr. Okonkwo's weapon, the device that could disable the Vethrak relay. Hub and throw their entire fleet into chaos. The only problem was reaching the hub alive. "Enemy fighters incoming," Jin reported from the pilot's seat. "At least 50, no. Make that 100. They're coming from everywhere. Then fly better." Cole replied grimly. The space around them became a nightmare of laser fire and missile trails. One of Cole's squadron was hit and vanished in a ball of flame. Then another. Then 2 more. The Vethrak fighters swarmed around them like angry insects, trying to cut off their approach to the relay hub. Cole grabbed the weapons console himself and fired until his guns overheated, taking down fighter after fighter, while Jin performed maneuvers that should have been impossible. But still the enemy kept coming, and still his squadron kept dying by the time they broke through the fire screen. Only 4 ships remained out of the original 12. The relay hub loomed ahead, a massive structure, bristling with antennas and protected by overlapping shield generators. It was the brain of the Vethrak fleet, coordinating thousands of ships through the bioelectric network that gave the Dominion its terrible advantage. And it was about to die. "We need to get within 10,000 kilometers, Cole announced. "Push through whatever they throw at us." What they threw at them was everything. Defense platforms opened fire with weapons designed to stop capital ships, and another of Cole's ships was torn apart by the onslaught. The remaining 3 pressed forward, their shields failing, their hulls cracking, their crews dying at their stations at 12,000 kilometers. Cole's first officer took a piece of shrapnel through her chest and died in his arms at 11,000 kilometers. The second ship in his squadron exploded when a lucky shot hit its reactor at 10,000 kilometers. The Defiant Wake was the only ship left battered, burning, barely holding together. Jin slumped over the controls, unconscious from blood loss. Half the crew was dead, and Cole himself could feel the warmth of his own blood running down his side. But they had made it. Dr. Okonkwo. Cole gasped into the comm. Fired the device in the cargo hold. Okonkwo activated the weapon she had spent 3 years creating. The EMP pulse erupted from the Defiant Wake in an invisible wave of precisely calibrated energy, passing through the relay hub's shields as if they did not exist and striking the delicate bioelectric systems within for a single heartbeat. Nothing seemed to happen, and the Vethrak fleet went madships that had been moving in perfect formation suddenly lurched in random directions, colliding with each other or firing on their own allies. Coordination that had taken millennia to evolve vanished in an instant. Half the defending fleet was reduced to chaos, their crews stumbling and confused. Their commanders unable to give orders that anyone could understand. Admiral Tanaka saw the moment of opportunity and seized it with both hands. All ships, press the attack. Give them everything we have. The human fleet surged forward, their small ships darting between the confused Vethrak vessels and tearing them apart with concentrated fire. What had been an even battle became a massacre as humanity's swarm doctrine proved devastatingly effective against an enemy that could no longer coordinate its defense. But the battle was far from won. The other half of the Vethrak fleet, the ships that had been outside the EMP's range, recovered quickly and counterattacked with furious intensity. The fighting became a brutal close-quarters brawl, ship against ship, pilot against pilot, with no room for tactics or strategy, only survival. Then the second miracle happened. Jump points opened on the far side of the system, and new ships poured through, but not human ships. These were Turani warships, their hulls painted with the ancient symbols of their warrior clans, followed by the massive crystalline dreadnoughts of the Keth Collective. The Allies had arrived, human vessels. Ambassador Kareth's voice crackled across the communications network. The Turani Republic stands with you today. Let us show these Vethrak what happens when they threaten our friends. The Keth said nothing. They never said much, but their weapons spoke eloquently as their dreadnoughts cut through Vethrak formations like knives through paper-high pretor. Vexal watched the battle from his flagship, Absolute Dominion, and felt something he had never experienced before: fear. His perfect fleet was being destroyed. His relay hub was offline, and the species he had personally declared extinct was tearing his empire apart. Retreat, he ordered, his mandibles clicking with barely controlled panic. All ships, retreat to the secondary. He never finished the sentence. A human strike wing, led by a pilot who had lost her entire family on Earth, broke through his flagship's defenses and put a missile directly into the bridge. The Absolute Dominion exploded in a bloom of fire that could be seen across the system. And with it died the architect of humanity's near extinction remaining Vethrak forces, leaderless and demoralized, scattered in all directions. Some surrendered, something Vethrak had never done before. Others fled into deep space, hoping to escape the vengeance of a species they had tried to destroy when the battle finally ended. Admiral Tanaka stood on her damaged bridge and looked out at the wreckage of what had once been the mightiest military force in the galaxy. Human ships moved through the debris, rescuing survivors and securing prisoners. Turani warriors sang victory songs across open channels, and the Keth simply hummed with what might have been satisfaction. A communication request came through from Ambassador Kareth. Tanaka accepted it, and the Turani warrior's scarred face appeared on her screen. He bowed deeply, a gesture of profound respect in his culture. "We should never have abandoned you," Kareth said. When the Concord voted to expel humanity, we should have fought harder. We should have stood with you from the beginning. Tanaka thought about everything her people had lost: Earth, the colonies, billions of lives, their place in the galaxy. She thought about 3 years of hiding and planning and hoping for this moment. We didn't earn our place among the stars, she replied, her voice cold and hard as space itself. We took it back. The Battle of Nexus Prime was over. The war for the galaxy was just beginning. Our enemies rejoiced until humanity answered the call 1 year after the Battle of Nexus Prime. The galaxy had become a very different place. The Vethrak Dominion, which had seemed invincible for centuries, had collapsed into civil war. Without High Praetor Vexal's iron grip, the various high factions turned on each other, fighting over the scraps of their crumbling empire. The species they had conquered rose up in rebellion, and everywhere the Dominion retreated. Freedom Advanced Humanity led the liberation campaign's Admiral Yuki Tanaka, coordinated the Allied fleet from her new flagship Dawn of Terra, directing operations across dozens of systems. World after world was freed from Vethrak control, their populations cheering as human ships appeared in their skies, the same humans that the galaxy had written off as extinct. Irony was not lost on anyone on the diplomatic front. Even greater changes were happening. The Galactic Concord, shaken by the war and humiliated by its own cowardice, had voted to dissolve itself entirely. In its place, a new coalition was forming, one built on different principles and led by different voices. We are gathered here today to sign the Charter of the United Species Alliance, announced the Keth representative in the Great Assembly Hall on neutral ground. This alliance will be founded on mutual defense, shared values, and the understanding that no species will ever again be abandoned to face extinction alone. The representatives of 40 species, including many who had voted to expel humanity 4 years earlier, signed the charter with varying degrees of enthusiasm. But before anyone else could approach the document, a place of honor had been reserved. Admiral Tanaka stepped forward and added humanity's signature to the charter. As she did, the hall erupted in applause, some sincere, some guilty, all acknowledging that the species they had left for dead had returned to reshape the galaxy. Humanity will serve on the High Council of the Alliance, the Keth continued, not as a minor member, but as a founding power equal to the eldest species among us. It was everything humanity had dreamed of before the fall, and it had cost them almost everything to achieve. Not far from the assembly hall, Captain Marcus Cole, Commodore Cole now, though he still hated the title, sat alone in a quiet garden. His wounds from the Battle of Nexus Prime had healed, mostly, but the scars remained, both the ones visible on his body and the ones hidden deeper inside. He thought about his crew, the ones who had died following him through impossible battles. He thought about his family, lost in the first hours of the war. He thought about all the blood on his hands, enemy and friend alike. A young officer approached him hesitantly. She was barely out of the academy, eager and bright, in a way that Cole had not felt in years. "Commodore Cole, sir. I've been assigned to your new command. I wanted to introduce myself." Cole looked at her and saw the future of humanity, a generation that had grown up in the shadow of war, but who would build something better. "What's your name, pilot?" "Lieutenant Chun, sir." "I want to learn from the best." Cole almost laughed. He was not the best. He was just the one who had survived. But maybe that was enough. "All right, Lieutenant. First lesson. The best pilots aren't the ones who fly the fastest or shoot the straightest. They're the ones who bring their people home. Remember then, on Earth, scarred, burned, but slowly healing, reconstruction had begun. Where cities once stood, new foundations were being laid. Where forests had burned, new seeds were being planted. The planet would never be what it was before, but it would live again. Diarlina Okonkwo stood at a podium in the rebuilt United Nations building and received the Alliance's highest scientific honor for her work on the EMP weapon that had turned the tide of battle. The audience included scientists from 20 different species, all eager to learn from the woman who had found the key to defeating the Vethrak. But Okonkwo's acceptance speech was not what anyone expected. "This award is for a weapon," she said, her voice quiet but clear. "A weapon that killed thousands and caused chaos and suffering on a massive scale. I accept it not with pride, but with responsibility. Humanity did not win this war because we had better technology. We won because we refused to give up." She paused, looking out at the assembled dignitaries. The Vethrak thought they destroyed us. They thought that if they killed enough of us, broke enough of our worlds, we would simply accept our fate and disappear. They did not understand that humanity's greatest strength is not our weapons or our ships. It is our refusal to surrender, our ability to find hope in the darkest moments, our stubborn insistence on surviving against all odds. The audience was silent, captivated by her words. Let this be a lesson to everyone watching. You can break our worlds. You can scatter our people. You can bring us to the very edge of extinction. But you will never break what makes us human. And that is what makes us dangerous. The applause that followed was thunderous. In the orbital space where Earth's moon had once hung, a new structure now floated, a vast ring of lights. One for each human who had died during the fall and the war that followed. There were billions of lights, so many that the ring glowed like a second sun when viewed from the planet's surface. Pilgrims came from across the galaxy to see it, members of every species, paying their respects to a people who had refused to die. The memorial had become a symbol, not just of human loss, but of human resilience. Among the visitors today were two very special guests. The old grandfather moved slowly now, supported by a cane and by the arm of the young woman beside him. His granddaughter May had grown up in the years since the fall, transforming from a frightened child into a confident officer in the new fleet. She wore her uniform with pride, and her grandfather with even greater pride. They stood together at the memorial's observation deck, watching the ring of lights turn slowly against the backdrop of stars. "I remember when you told me we would survive," May said softly. "That night on the refugee station when everything seemed hopeless. You said humans always find a way." Her grandfather nodded, his old eyes reflecting the light of billions of souls. "I remember. Did you really believe it?" Even then, he was quiet for a long moment, considering the question. Around them, other visitors moved through the memorial, speaking in hushed voices and marveling at the scale of loss and recovery it represented. "I believed it because I had no choice," he finally replied. "When everything is taken from you, belief is all you have left. And sometimes that is enough." May looked out at the stars, the same stars that had seemed so cold and indifferent on that terrible night 4 years ago. They did not seem indifferent anymore. They seemed like a challenge and invitation, a promise of adventures yet to come. "Do you think we'll face something like this again?" she asked. "Another enemy that wants to destroy us?" Her grandfather smiled, a real smile, warm and full of the wisdom that only comes from surviving the unsurvivable. "Maybe. Probably. The universe is vast, and not everyone in it will welcome humanity with open arms. But whoever comes next will learn what the Vethrak learned." He put his hand on his granddaughter's shoulder and squeezed gently. "You can break our worlds. You can scatter our people. You can push us to the very edge of oblivion. But you will never break what makes us human. And that, little one, is what makes us dangerous." May stood straight and tall in her uniform, looking out at the memorial, at the stars, at the future that awaited her species. "Yes," she said quietly. "It certainly does behind them." The ring of lights continued its eternal rotation, a monument to the dead, a celebration of the living, and a warning to anyone foolish enough to underestimate the small, stubborn, endlessly surprising species called humanity. The galaxy had learned its lesson. Humanity was here to stay.